cast breaking down all of the games in Week 18. Yes, I do have the hiccups, so stay tuned for the show. We're here to break down the playoff matchups going into this week, as well as going over the coaching firings, hirings. Tyreek Hill might be on the move, and then any other news we might miss, as well as we go to Week 18 recap, entering into Super Wildcard Weekend.
Yeah, entering in a super wild card weekend, and we had a super massive Sunday night football game. Some were saying this was potentially going to be the greatest regular season matchup of all time, where we had Sunday night football. We had the showdown of the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings, and this was the game to determine the one seed in the NFC. And it turns out the team that had more playoff experience had a quarterback who could remain calm when he was turning the ball over. And the best offensive player on the field ended up winning that game. And the Detroit Lions figured out the formula to beat the Minnesota Vikings, which is hey, maybe just blitz Sam Darnold every single time if we don't think we can actually stop the Vikings. And then eventually, Kevin O'Connell was going to start to lose his hair on the sideline. Kevin O'Connell probably aged about a year or two on the sideline watching this game. And then we get that signature Sam Darnold look every time we pan to him on the sideline, which is just terrified. I mean, this guy had so many open receivers in this game, had so many opportunities to just hit guys to blow the game open, but you go 0 for 3 in the red zone as far as touchdowns in the first half, where you miss two fourth down conversions, and then you end up settling for a field goal where if you just kick the field goal, you would be up 12. But the Lions ended up putting pressure on the Minnesota Vikings, making the Vikings play their game. And then you heard this guy's name all night, but we'll say his name again. Amik Robertson coming in the game, typically playing a slot corner, but him and Justin Jefferson, there's a little bit of history there. So it's kind of the perfect matchup for Justin Jefferson, where they used to play each other in college, where Justin Jefferson was at LSU. I believe Amik Robertson was just at one of those schools that you put tech in front of after the state's name there, but they were
LA
used
Tech.
to LA Tech. Yeah, exactly. They were used to battling in college. So he ends up blowing the game open. And then the Lions, I was like, well, if they get Alex Anzalone back, he'll at least be able to contain the massive run plays, and he'll at least be able to tackle people. And their tackling was better in this game. They weren't giving up as many big plays. And heading into the playoffs, where your biggest challenge is probably going to be Philadelphia. Well, now we have a solution for AJ Brown and Amik Robertson. And then now we have Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone, who can just trail Saquon Barkley the whole game. So I felt like the Lions coaching staff really put on a display this game, where defensively they had a plan and they figured out the Minnesota Vikings and kind of handed the formula to the Rams, where it's like, okay, you want to beat the Vikings, all you have to do is just blitz Sam Darnold every single time, and then he's going to start panicking, missing throws, and then his accuracy went way down in this game, where at one point he was 18 for 40. I mean, trying to put up Anthony Richardson numbers.
Yeah, this game, the Lions, the winner of this game, obviously they win the one seed. We all know the ramifications, but the fact that the Lions went out there and all but dominated this game proves that they deserve the one seed all along. And with Sam Darnold, like my biggest fear about this is seeing this game and the Lions handing the formula to the Rams is like this Vikings team has been on this honestly like storybook season. You have Sam Darnold come in, he plays like an MVP, and then the last game of the season he has a complete crash out, 18 of 41, zero touchdowns, QBR in the 50s. Like the Vikings to me feel like they're in the next step to just blowing out and just getting blown out against the Rams at this point with how bad they played. And then the Lions, I mean, everyone wants to talk about their injuries on the defense, especially Tarico, who said it, I don't know, 25 times. If we took a shot every time he said it, we would have been blacked out in the hospital recovering from alcohol poisoning, the amount of times they mentioned it. But at the end of the day, they have the best offense in football. Even with a bad game, a relatively bad Jared Goff game where he threw two picks, they still ended up putting up 30 points. And then their defense, getting pressure the entire time, Amik Robinson holding Justin Jefferson to 3 catches. That's the winning formula. And now they get to rest. Maybe we'll see Malcolm Rodriguez return potentially, and some of the other defensive players for the Lions return. And their defense that was playing well before all the injuries coming back against whoever they face. Lions, Lions should feel good about where they are. And the Vikings, they might very well be out after next week.
Yeah, they might very well be out after next week. And, coming into the game, I was like, this is the game that is going to determine who's going to win Coach of the Year. And that's really going to matter in this game because with Dan Campbell, we saw people in that year where they lost 7 straight games. So, like, it's time to fire Aaron Glenn. I think it's time to move on from Aaron Glenn. Dan Campbell can stay, but like this defense is so terrible. He's like, no, we have to stay the course here. We have to just trust our process, trust Brad Holmes, the GM here, because every single season we've gotten better and they go on a massive run, knock out the Green Bay Packers here. And for the Lions, it's like the fact that their backs were up against the wall here. They just played an emotional game against the San Francisco 49ers, had every reason not to show up. Like, hey, the Niners are a team where we lost 24-7 and we lost that massive lead against them in the conference championship, and you had every game to put every reason to put everything into that game, but not show up for the Vikings games. Like, oh well, it's Sunday Night Football, we just played on Monday, we're tired here. But the Lions, with possibly having their greatest season and having to be a wild card, and you'd be the best wild card team ever, but still it's like this is just the exact situation that they have thrived in. They had adversity in this game where their defense showed up in the red zone. It's like that's all I really want to see from the Lions. Like, I know you're going to give up yards, teams are going to drive on you, but like Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell in the red zone, like their defense has been sound and they've stayed disciplined. They're just not giving up these dumb wide open touchdowns. It's not the same Lions team. And with Dan Campbell, one of the reasons why he can stay with someone like Aaron Glenn and why he can stick by him where everyone was calling for that guy's job is like, hey, how about my first press conference where I come out here talking about biting off kneecaps and then suddenly Max Kellerman's on ESPN like, this is like I mean, can you believe this guy's talking about biting kneecaps? Like, I get it, but like, this is just like so unprofessional. And then you have Stephen A talking about how Dan Campbell should get fired, and you see people react off these first game press conferences. But like, Dan Campbell, like, don't forget when the media talks about him, they wanted him to be fired after his first press conference. And this is one of the most historic turnarounds in NFL history where you have your greatest season ever have to compete for the 1 seed in the last game versus your division rival, and you don't even beat them. You beat the hell out of them in that last drive where you have Jameer Gibbs get his fourth touchdown. Like that drive was all muscle. It was everyone pushing him in the end zone together, which is embodying that Lions identity, which the media still has not caught on to because people are like, oh, if any team's going to fall off this year, it's the Lions. Like, no, if any team's going to come back stronger and get the 1 seed, it's going to be the Lions because last year they weren't even supposed to be in the conference championship.
Yeah, and they made it. And they've only gotten better since. I mean, they started off 1-7 that faithful year. They rattle off all their wins to beat the Packers in the last game of the season. And then last year, they had the lead. They were almost in the Super Bowl. They didn't blow them in the second half. Then this year, they've been the best team. The only teams they've lost to, I mean, they lost to the Bills and Bucks, who are in the playoffs. Bills 2 seed. Obviously, the Bucks won their division. So it's not like their losses have been bad either, and they haven't really had really big stinker games either. Maybe one you point to is the Texans, in which they still won despite Jared Goff throwing 5 picks. So the Lions are a team of destiny. I feel like what we're seeing is the equivalent to the Chicago Cubs in 2016 or the Red Sox in 2004. Like this team feels different, which is why I didn't want to pick them to lose this game. And then for Dan Campbell, I mean, the guy that they wanted to fire after year one, they wanted to fire after year two, and then they're always talking about him always going for it on fourth down. It's become their identity. But you look on the other side of it, you see Kevin O'Connell, who is definitely more of a conservative coach, kick these field goals when they're on their goal line, basically. Pretty much the anti Dan Campbell. And this isn't a knock on Kevin O'Connell. He's a great coach, but these Vikings, they end up with 9 points, and all of those could have been touchdowns at one point, which could have completely changed the script of the game. I understand Sam Darnold didn't play his best game, but on the opposite end of it, like all the media has talked about is, oh my God, they go for it on fourth down too much. They're too aggressive. But every time they deliver and they get those fourth down conversions, it's just, it feels like there's some sort of media outcry against Dan Campbell. In this game, it feels like they were a bit rectified in this game. Dan Campbell played a great game or coached a great game. They went for it on fourth and they did what the Lions do best, and they balled.
Yeah, no, and the Lions are starting to like put pressure on teams right now where it's like it's kind of out of character for the Minnesota Vikings to go for it on fourth down, but it felt like the stakes were so high in that game where you saw the Vikings go for it on fourth down, and for every fourth down conversion that the Vikings missed, it's like their confidence got crushed a little bit more. You saw Justin Jefferson on the sideline where he's like, "Oh, fuck, it might be time to get out here," but like for any team that went like 14-3, it's like, my God, this is like historic. Like this looked like if the Vikings ended up being the number one seed, it was going to be like Dirk Nowitzki's MVP season, where the Warriors just beat them as the eighth seed, the We Believe team with Steven Jackson on that team. You had Matt Barnes, a couple other just old veteran ballers. Like they would have just snuffed this team out. And that's kind of what it feels like with them going up against the Rams now. Just a couple veteran savvy players. I can't see the Vikings just getting blown out the same way they did, because I don't know defensively if the Rams will have that kind of personnel, at least at corner, to be able to do that for the Vikings. So I feel like it'll be a better game. But the Lions coming out here just proving everyone wrong again, because I feel like everyone wants, it's like the anti Bills. Like people are just waiting for a reason to jump on the Bills bandwagon, where it's like people are just waiting for a reason to bury the Lions, because, it has looked like they've been the same old Lions at some point, at least as far as the injuries, but they've been able to overcome those injuries in a way where most other teams aren't able to do, where the Lions have had every excuse to just pack it in. It's like, okay, Hutchinson's out, Anzalone got banged up, like we'll get him next year. It's like, no, our offense is too good to fail. And your offense being too good to fail here is also Jameer Gibbs in this game has not one, not two, not three, but four touchdowns, tying Calvin Johnson for the most touchdowns by a Lions player ever. And this guy has damn near 2,000 scrimmage yards this year. He leads the NFL in touchdowns at the running back position this year. So you're looking at a game where this game means everything for the Detroit Lions. Everyone's kind of made up their mind, and it seemed like as soon as Josh Allen had three good games, everyone's like, "Yep, he's the MVP." It's like, hold on, we have an entire season to put into context, and we have to wait for it to end here. And for the Detroit Lions, you have David Montgomery before, who had 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. So Jameer Gibbs could, if you give him that, would have damn near 32 touchdowns and 3,000 scrimmage yards if David Montgomery isn't there. And in a game where it's a battle for the one seed and both teams were kind of stagnant a little bit on offense, Jameer Gibbs was the one guy blowing it open, where he had not one, not two, but four touchdowns in this game. It's like, when you win your team the number one seed and you ball out like that on Sunday Night Football versus the second best team in the league, at least record wise, in the Minnesota Vikings, tied with you. It's like it's them, the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens. But you went out there, destroyed their defense, and the Vikings defense had been playing well. It's like, how is Jameer Gibbs not in the MVP conversation after that game?
Yeah, and you know what? I think I could honestly agree with that because we have Saquon, and obviously Saquon, if we're talking about running backs, he's had the 2,000 yards. But at the same time, with the Lions, with their defense being as bad as it did, the pressure that they have on their offense to execute, and the fact that he went out there and he had 180 scrimmage yards and four touchdowns in that game. And it wasn't like that was the only game he's done that. He's done that every game. He's put pressure on them. He's run the football. Not only is he good in the backfield, but he's also good in the catching game as well. So I'm here for that as far as the MVP. I think, going into this game, we're like, oh, maybe Sam Darnold deserves to be a top five candidate. Maybe, even Jared Goff in this case was in that conversation. But at this point, I feel like the most valuable person on that Lions team right now is Jameer Gibbs offensively with how he's played.
Yeah, and it's Jahmyr Gibbs, and then also it's like with this Lions team, the thing that people forget about, it's like, okay, we contain Jahmyr Gibbs. That's good. Well, you know what you have to do to contain Jahmyr Gibbs? You have to have a blitz where you have someone shadowing, so that takes someone off of Jared Goff. That gives him more time to throw because you have to have someone on him at all times. Because when you did blitz, Jared Goff is about to get crushed, but the pass where he throws the screen over to him and then he picks up a first down for 10 yards, like, okay, that's going to happen. Then if you focus on Jahmyr Gibbs, then Jamison Williams gets loose. Then Sam Laporta starts catching passes, and we had like a clutch play from Laporta multiple times, from Jamison Williams multiple times, and then Amon Ra just comes out of nowhere and reminds you like, I'm that guy. Like, I'm still one of those guys who's not mentioned regularly in top 5 receivers, but I should be in the conversation. It almost feels like Amon-Ra is turning into, like, the Larry Fitzgerald of this generation, where maybe he's not, like, the sexiest wide receiver as far as it comes to, like, someone like Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase, but Larry Fitzgerald, what he did do, he was one of the hardest workers. He had longevity similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown, kinda had to earn his way, played for, like, a lower tier franchise with the Arizona Cardinals, but had some of their best years with them. It's like it kind of feels like Amon-Ra St. Brown's filling those shoes for this generation.
I think that's fitting. I think that's a good fit for him. Um, they both have similar builds too. I feel like they don't drop the ball very often. I believe he had the least amount of drops of any of the top receivers because he had like 150 targets. Um, so I like that comparison for Amon Ra personally. But it was good to see the Lions win. It was good to see their defense play as well as they did. Going into this game, that was my big concern, but they played really well, and now they're the one seed. Now they get a break, and I think their defense is going to look even better this upcoming time they face whoever they face because they have what they need there. So great for the Lions there.
Super Bowl bound. Let's go.
Super Bowl bound indeed. Then let's go over to the other side of this here. We'll talk about the Ravens game quickly here. Lamar, he steps in. He has his 4,000 yards that he officially got. He ends the season with 41 touchdowns, 4 picks, and then rushing for 900. So a total of 5,000 total yards for Lamar Jackson, the guy that is in that conversation with the MVP. At this point, he's probably the favorite after the results of the Bengals playoff hopes. Um, he was 16 to 20, 16 to 32, 2 touchdowns, and then rushed for another one as well. Derrick Henry had a big game, but does this solidify Lamar as the MVP now after beating the Browns and having the campaign he's had?
Yeah, I mean, when it's like literally a game apart, and like the teams like are both teams where the Bills are one of the only teams that has had multiple guys have you know multiple interceptions in a game on their team. They're one of the only teams to have that. And then you also have James Cook, who had 18 touchdowns, and Derrick Henry had like a big impact as well. But not let's not pretend like the argument has been that Josh Allen has had no help where Lamar Jackson has Derrick Henry. Like James Cook has played really well this season, and so has Khalil Shakur. Like he's been a good receiver for you. Lamar, he has Zay Flowers and he has Rashad Bateman, but Rashad Bateman can come and go. Mark Andrews took a little bit of time to get going, and then their other weapons, like they're kind of hit or miss when it comes to week. So it's like Lamar Jackson has better numbers. He has the best QBR, the second best QBR of all time this season. And then when you're also looking at the stats, it's like, okay, if the stats are that close where Lamar Jackson is better statistically in pretty much every category than Josh Allen and has one of the best QBRs of all time. And everyone who has had that QBR has won MVP. You have to have a great argument against it. Well, it's like, all right, now we go the head to head argument. What did you do when you guys played on Sunday Night Football, which is when these awards should be decided? It's when the brightest lights are on you, when you're playing up against the top talent in the league. And guess what? One player went 9 for 31, and the other player ran all over the Buffalo Bills. And it's not like their defense is a slouch here, but Buffalo only got 10 points versus Baltimore. So, like, at some point, it has to come down to a head to head matchup. But personally, I think, Lamar deserves the MVP, but I feel like we need to shout out Josh Allen still, and we still need to shout out someone like Saquon Barkley and Jameer Gibbs, because Saquon Barkley is now one of the top 10 running backs of all time. When someone does something that historic, like as a running back or a wide receiver, they're never taken seriously as an MVP candidate. So it's like at some point, I feel like we should just do it like baseball does, and you have like the award for the pitcher, and then you have like the most valuable player.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, yeah, I mean, Lamar, all of his stats point to him being MVP. And also, I mean, he had 40 touchdowns and less than 5 interceptions, which we saw Aaron Rodgers do 3 times. He won the MVP each time. We saw it happen with Brady when he won and he had those to stats. So if we're just going with history here, then it's a no-brainer that Lamar's the MVP. And I would also shout out, you mentioned Saquon. I would still put Joe Burrow in that conversation because he's had a great season. Unfortunately, though, when you miss the playoffs, that you're not going to be able to be in that conversation, unfortunately, despite the fact that honestly his defense robbed him of an MVP this year with how great Joe Burrow played.
Yeah, honestly, with Burrow though, my problem with him being in the MVP conversation and people feeling bad for him, it's if he didn't score 10 points versus the Patriots, he would have been in the playoffs and probably the MVP. Like, you lost to the Patriots in a game where you only scored 10 points. Like, sorry, don't care that it's week 1. That's why you're not in the playoffs right now. That's ridiculous and unacceptable. And you go 9-8 back-to-back years with um Zach Taylor, and then you don't score any points in the first half versus the Chargers, and then suddenly your offense comes to life here. And there's just been some of these games where it's like gotta get going sooner. And then you also lost 2 one possession games to Lamar Jackson where Lamar made the play and you didn't. You had chances on that Thursday night football to win the game and you were up 10 points and you let 2 leads go against Baltimore, and then you only scored 10 points against the New England Patriots, and then you didn't score any points in the first half against the Chargers. I mean, that's not your defense. That's on you for not scoring any points. And I get you had incredible numbers here, but Patrick Mahomes has had 50 touchdowns in the season and was the MVP. And sometimes those 8 extra touchdowns are the difference between you winning your division and you going 9-8 and missing the playoffs. Because if you pulled it out in all of those games and were just better against the Chargers, Patriots, and the Ravens twice, you're what, the 2 seed?
Yeah, I'm looking at these games here. Let's not forget about that Eagles game when they got blown out too. They got embarrassed by the Eagles when they faced. And then a couple other games. I mean, that Giants game where they were, even though they won that game, that was a hideous game that they shouldn't have even won. That Browns game was also ugly. At the end of the day, this Bengals team was never, they never deserved the playoff spot. I mean, you can't start that bad and expect to make the playoffs. You were 5-8 at one point, and then you
Yeah.
crawled up and you were competing at the end, which I guess that is a semblance of how good this team can be. But at the end of the day, you can't lose to the Steelers and have the Steelers, which we saw how bad they played this past week. They put up 44 points against you last time. And then the Chargers, they put up points against you. The Ravens, obviously, they had a close game there, but you can't have these games where you just start so slow. And at this point, like, this has now happened in 3 consecutive seasons where they start slow, and it's what ultimately cost them the playoff spot, or they have to play as the 7th seed. So at this point, it's like, what's the deal with Zach Taylor? You want to give him one more year, sure, but how many more years are they going to have to start this slow and start off 0-3 or 1-4, or eventually be 4-8 before eventually they're like, maybe this guy isn't the guy. Maybe Zach Taylor isn't the coach. I know they moved on from Lou Anarumo, which based on how their defense played all season, I'm not all that upset about it. Although I do think he's a good coordinator and he'll find another spot. But you guys got to start quicker because all they had to do was go out there and beat the Patriots and play competitively to start the season, just like every other team has to do. And they're in the playoffs, and we're talking about them against the Bills instead of the Broncos.
Yeah, and it's too like also like the attitude of Joe Burrow too. When the media would ask him about it, he's like, "Well, to make the playoffs, all you need is 10 wins." It's like, yes, all you do need is 10 wins, and you have to take the easy wins because winning the NFL is hard. It's one of the toughest games in sports to win. Like this is one of the toughest leagues in the world, and you're just like sitting there at 1-5, like, oh yeah, we'll win eventually. That's like my biggest problem because I know Joe Burrow has had great stats, but some of those you would also call stat padding when you're out of the game and then putting up big numbers and then making it closer than it looks. And then you're also 9-8 here. It's like you have to start faster there, and I get you move on from Lou Anarumo, but, like, at some point, that has to come down to the head coach because whose idea was it to completely flip the script on the Kansas City Chiefs defensively in the second half? Like, I feel like Lou Anarumo has been able to go head to head with Andy Reid. I feel like it's also an issue with talent on defense where you've had players like Jesse Bates leave you. You've had some issues with your secondary getting burned. And, maybe you need a new voice in the locker room with Lou Anarumo. But also, if you need a new voice in the locker room with Lou Anarumo, maybe you need a new voice outside of Zach Taylor when Joe Burrow's screaming at him on the sideline. And then you're seeing your team just make some giant mental errors on national television weekly, from special teams to drops to fumbles out of the end zone.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating because this team offensively, I mean, I know Chase Brown didn't play in this game, but you have Jamar Chase, who obviously is, this season he's the best wide receiver in the league. And I guess that's a good game to pivot to, this Bengals and Steelers game. Joe Burrow has a good game, but Khalil Herbert does the best he can. But overall, they win this game, the Bengals did, and they needed the Broncos to lose and the Dolphins to lose. They nearly got there. But at the end of the day, on the other side of the ball, we have the Steelers, who pretty much since the Big Ben era, I've complained about how bad their offense can look at times. And for a while, I thought that they had reached new pastures. I thought that they took the boat out of Alcatraz and out of Guantanamo Bay, and now their offense is back. Nope, they're back to the same old shit. Russell Wilson, the shit that we saw in Denver, whether it was last year with Sean Payton or the Nathaniel Hackett era, Russell Wilson is the most frustrating quarterback to have. You want to talk about whether it be like the Russell Wilsons, I'm not the the Kirk Cousins or the Tony Romos of the world, where you look at their stats and you go, well, they played pretty well this year. But then you look at the tape and you see these games specifically where it just feels like Russ is doing absolutely fucking nothing. He might as well be tying his shoes or chewing bubble gum while he's holding the ball because just making these for a guy that's been in the league for what 15 years now, the shit that he did, whether it's trying to scrimmage when it's 3rd and 14 and he's running so that they can be 4th and 12, like what are you thinking? And then they're trying to get into field goal range, and instead of throwing the ball away, he takes a sack. It's these little mental errors that Russell Wilson, for a guy that's
Burning
won a
20
Super Bowl,
seconds.
yeah, and burning 20 seconds, it's like there's nothing more frustrating than having Russell Wilson as your quarterback because he'll have these games. Yeah, you can see he can throw these balls well, but at the same time, these mental errors should not exist for a guy who has been a Pro Bowler, who is going to go down as one of the top quarterbacks of all time, no matter where you rank him. And it's just these moments that drive me nuts, especially these last 3 years with Russell Wilson, whether in Denver or in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. No, it has to drive you nuts. And all you have to do is just look at Mike Tomlin before Ben Roethlisberger retired and look at him presently. And he looks like he went through all 8 years of Obama's presidency in one term here. I mean, Mike Tomlin looks like he's aged precipitously after Big Ben has left. And like, my thing with like him is like the commentators are on the sideline. It's like, wow, it's Ravens and Steelers. It's a huge divisional game, man. And look at Mike Tomlin on the sideline. He's chill. He's chiller than cool. I mean, how could you not be stressed out during this game? And I'm like, yeah, how could you not be stressed out during this game? Because like this is a time of year where the Steelers went on a similar generational run to the Jacksonville Jaguars, where the Jaguars were like, maybe we could be the 1 seed. We're in contention to be the best team in the AFC. And then ever since that moment where they're close to the top of the AFC, loss, 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 loss. I mean, you lose 4 straight games at the end of the year. And I get these games are hard, but like you can't win one of these games. And now we're supposed to buy you getting into the playoffs and winning. And then like defensively, the fact that I don't know if TJ Watt is dealing with an injury right now, but you haven't been able to get any pressure. You haven't been able to get any sacks. I don't know if TJ Watt is like struggling through an injury right now, and he very may well be, and just toughing it out. But like he hasn't looked like the same player over the past few weeks. He hasn't looked like the dominant best defensive player in the league that we've seen him be in the past. Um, And then just offensively, the run game, it's gone. I mean, we had a nice run with Najee Harris. We had a nice run where Jalen Warren started to show up, but at some point, you are who you are. And you mentioned Russell Wilson being one of the most frustrating quarterbacks. What if you could pair him with one of the most frustrating running backs, one of the most frustrating offensive coordinators, and one of the most frustrating top talent wide receivers in the league in George Pickens? Wow, what a combination. That seems like a recipe for success this year. And oh yeah, we have Mike Williams too. What a what a great pot of talent for the Pittsburgh Steelers here. A bad offensive line, a disappointing quarterback, a disappointing running back, a disappointing coordinator, and a disappointing wide receiver one.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I saw Russell Wilson play there. I saw Najee play. I'm just curious where George Pickens was. Where did George Pickens go? Did he get off the bus this game? Did he have an ankle injury? Did he get a boo boo on the sidelines? Where was George Pickens when you needed him most? A guy that I think
He went
talent wise could easily be a top five wide receiver in this league. He had as many receiving yards as I did this game.
actually
Zero.
less.
He had, ze-
He had negative
he had
one.
zero receiving. He had zero receiving yards in this game. Zero. And for a guy that has the talent, he can catch any ball. He's made some of the greatest catches I've ever seen. And for some reason, he's nowhere to be found. Their offense, they're relying on Pat Fryermuth and Mike Williams at this point. And it's ridiculous. Calvin Austin. Where was Calvin Austin in this game? The guy that was filling in for George Pickens when he was banged up. He was nowhere to be found. You had more catches for Van Jefferson. Yes, remember that Van Jefferson, the guy that had who was the fifth receiver for the Rams a couple of years ago? Yeah, that Van Jefferson had more production than Calvin Austin and George Pickens combined in this game. And it kills me because this Steelers team, they had not only, I mean, obviously the Bengals didn't end up making the playoffs, but they had the chance to take the knife and cut it into the Bengals and just kill them, kill their playoff hope, have them have a losing season. But instead, their offense, the Guantanamo Bay Steelers, they're back like they never left. Frustrating me, pulling my hair out, turning my hair gray, all because for what? Because George Pickens doesn't like Russell Wilson, essentially.
Yeah, and it's like, bro, if playing the Texans is not motivation enough, like for this game to get up and after it and send the Bengals home, your divisional opponent, Joey Burrow, Joe Cool, like that's not motivation enough for you. Like this team has no dog. It's like if I went to you and I was like, hey, would you like to go to a fancy steakhouse or would you like to go to McDonald's? Would you like to go to Burger King or would you like to go to Terry Black's? And that is the difference of playing the Houston Texans or playing the Baltimore Ravens. So you literally decided to go get fucked in the face instead of having a nice, easy ride versus the Houston Texans and win a playoff game you damn well wouldn't deserve to win. But if you went out there and beat the Bengals, you could have had that right and privilege. I mean, the Chargers still would have won. You weren't able to do that, but you still like that still wasn't motivation enough on top of sending Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase home after and a loss. But no, you got their hopes up. You got all of Cincinnati's hopes up that maybe Carson Wentz could do something, and he let us down. But he's one
Carson
of you.
Wentz.
He let him
Carson.
down.
Yeah, we needed the Dolphins to lose. Check. We needed the Chiefs to lose. Not check, which I guess we could talk about the Chiefs next. Or should we talk
Yeah,
about the Dolphins? We need to talk about one of these teams that didn't deliver on Joe Burrow in the playoffs. I guess we can
yeah,
talk about the Chiefs because there's not much there. Obviously, they're not going to start their starters because why would they? They have the one seed secure, and I doubt they want to see Joe Burrow anyways in the playoffs. But
no,
this was the chance for Carson Wentz to get another opportunity in the NFL as a starter. And 10 of 17, 98 yards, QBR 75. I don't know if this was career assassination for Carson Wentz or this was set out ahead of time. Like Andy Reid said, you know what? Let's let these Broncos into the playoffs. The Bills will take care of them next week, and we'll be on to whoever we have to face in front of us the following week. They decided 0 points. We had Carson Steele, couldn't get much going on the ground. Credit to the Broncos defense. I'll give them credit there, but 0 points. If they would have lost, say, 38-10, I wouldn't have been suspicious. But 0 points with Andy Reid as your head coach. And I understand Carson Steele had played well for them. They have decent enough receivers that something could have gone down. Don't you think it's a little suspicious that they scored 0 points? You think Carson Wentz is that bad? Or would ahead of time they said, let's let the Broncos win this game. Fuck the Bengals. They've beaten us in the playoffs before. They said it was Burrowhead. I feel personally like this was a jab at the Bengals. They said, you know what? We're just going to tuck our hands in our pockets, take it easy. We'll rest, let the Broncos walk all over us, and we're going to say fuck you to Cincinnati. I feel like that's what that Chiefs game was.
Yeah, and at least, Denver deserved to make the playoffs because they decided, oh, wait, the regular season starts in September. It starts in week one. I know the Cincinnati Bengals don't think it starts until mid October. Halloween is when they decide to start showing up and like, oh, maybe it's start playing football. But like the Broncos got the memo and they're like, hey, football starts in September. So why don't we actually start out hot? Bo Nix will play medium and then start getting better throughout the year. And then Bo Nix has developed into, quite a killer after this game where he just went out there, took his opportunity, and he's like, all right, we got the time to stick the knife in the Chiefs. I'm going up against their backups. Let's make sure it looks like on the scoreboard that we went up against the City Chiefs backup. And you want to talk about a team just sticking the knife into the Cincinnati Bengals? Like, hey, we showed up at the beginning of the regular season. We deserve it. And Bo Nix like took his victory lap where he's like, I'm gonna have the best game of the season and just absolutely dig the knife into the Bengals and then maybe make the Bills like think twice about when they play the Denver Broncos. Maybe the Bills start to look at that like, okay, Bo Nix got into a shootout with the Cincinnati Bengals, made some incredible throws, was bringing them back. Like the Broncos offense was dynamic, it looked explosive, and their defense was not allowing anything. That's the mentality I like to see for a team heading into the playoffs, where it looked like everything came together for the Broncos, and that's a game I feel like it'll give Bo Nix confidence, but maybe it's not the Chiefs starters, but maybe you do get a placebo effect where you're looking and you still are playing the Kansas City Chiefs. They still are the number one seed, and then you just beat the crap out of them heading into the playoffs. Maybe Bo Nix is feeling himself a little bit, and then you're like, all right, we do have a coaching mismatch. Maybe we're starting to feel good about ourselves heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. This guy had more touchdowns than incompletions in this game. He also had 50 yards on the ground. And this is a guy, I was really critical of Bo Nix entering the draft because I just didn't believe in him very much. I thought that he was going to be like a Mac Jones figure. Maybe he could move a little bit more, but maybe I underestimated his athleticism. But he ends the season with nearly 30 touchdowns. He had 30 total touchdowns in this season. And then he had 3,700 passing yards, 12 picks. But for a guy that started the season as mediocre as he did, the stretch that he's gone on the last 7 or 8 games, I got to give Bo Nix his props. I think he could probably be the rookie of the year at this point with how he's played. The Broncos, let's not forget last year, them breaking up with Russell Wilson, taking that massive cap hit, the risk that they had, Sean Payton, the public embarrassment that he had for Russ. Now it's starting to culminate. They were 10-7. They drafted their guy. Looks like he's the franchise guy for the future. And now he has a chance to do something that only one Broncos quarterback has done in the history of their franchise that they've drafted, and that's win a playoff game. He could go down as the second Broncos quarterback not named Tim Tebow to win a playoff game for the Broncos.
Damn.
And I think he deserves it. And I give him credit to him. I understand these were his backups, but at the same time, you mollywopped them. Bo Nix played a perfect game. You can't really, there's no thing you can poke holes in this game. He played excellent.
Yeah, no, he played good, and I like to see it because I like competitive football in the playoffs, and I really hope we get an exciting game versus Denver, where Denver's carrying a lot of momentum into the playoffs, and rightfully so. And Sean Payton, he had his public humiliation. Some people are like, is it really necessary? It's kind of like Kendrick and Drake, or Aubrey, where Sean Payton was just kind of like, I'm going to take every chance to absolutely violate you if I have to take it there. And this is coming from Russell Wilson, who, like, Sean Payton was his idol. He wanted them to fire Pete Carroll so they could get Sean Payton on the Seattle Seahawks. But it was one of those situations where it's like, do not meet your heroes, kids. And that was one of the most come to earth, come to Jesus, do not meet your hero moments of all time for Russell Wilson because Sean Payton did not like him. He's like, "You want your own office? Are you joking, bro?" And then he didn't mind just kicking him out. Drafted Bo Nix, and then it's all worked out for Denver. So credit to Sean Payton. He's always been one of the top coaches in the game, but he's starting to figure out in his second spot. And if they can go out there, get someone like a Tyreek Hill, maybe he wants to go head to head with the Chiefs, or someone like a George Pickens, or you know, if they don't bring back T. Higgins to the Bengals, maybe you go out there, get one of the next top receivers, or that's probably going to be a focus for you in the draft. And he's been good at drafting running backs and receivers.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think that the Broncos this season, they're still in rebuild, but the fact that they're where they are, absolutely excellent. And honestly, we could say the same for the Chargers too. But the Broncos, from where they were just 2 years ago, being the most disappointing team in all of football, to where they are now with a good defense and a good offense, I love to see it. But let's talk about the team that also needed to win to make the playoffs, which was the Dolphins. The Broncos lost and they won. They'd be in the playoffs. And the Dolphins, they basically just packed it in. We had Snoop Hunley in the game, and he did what Snoop Hunley does, which is not very much. Devon A-Chain did his thing, but this game was honestly the biggest killer of any team in New York because Aaron Rodgers, a guy that's played like shit all season, the Jets have been the most disappointing team in football all season, perennial worst top fives according to the Brickyard. And he ends the season throwing 4 touchdowns. He gets his 500th passing touchdown, and he looks good. And everybody around New York after this game is going to say, well, I know we've played bad all season, but I know that this season has been a complete nightmare, but. And that's what they're going to be talking about the rest of the offseason is, well, Aaron Rodgers didn't play great this year, but remember that last game against Snoop Hunley when he threw 4 touchdowns in week 18 when it didn't matter? Should we bring back Aaron Rodgers to the Jets and run it back with a new head coach and a new GM? Maybe get some more weapons because they clearly don't have enough weapons despite trading for Devontae Adams and having Garrett Wilson. No, maybe then they'll solve their issues now with Aaron Rodgers, who will now be 42 this upcoming season. This was the worst because this gave Jets hope that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back next year and be what they thought he was going to be. So shame on the Dolphins. This is just cruelty at its
Yeah.
finest.
Yeah, now he's gonna what? If he's following in Brett Favre's footsteps, go to the Vikings, right? Is that where he's on
Yep.
schedule to? Oh, Sam Darnold melted down. People were saying that Sam Darnold should get paid $60 million next year and look like a deer in the headlights and only got 9 points. But suddenly it's like, well, maybe JJ McCarthy could sit for another year. Then we bring in Aaron Rodgers. It's like there is no way, and I haven't seen any of these Jets fans that you speak of, but there's no way in hell you actually believe that. The amount of delusion where you have to talk yourself into another year with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, like everything is pointing to Aaron Rodgers leaving the Jets this year. He's like asked about New York. He's like, man, like I'm like so grateful because these have been like the 2 best years of my life, man. And then you have foot enthusiast and candidate for the New York Jets head coaching role, Rex Ryan, saying, "Ain't no way in hell Aaron Rodgers is going to be the coach of this team next year." And he's someone who may be on that team next year. May the Jets may bring him back because if it didn't work the first time, it's definitely going to work the second time. Especially when he's been sitting on TV for 10 years, so nothing could go wrong there. So it's like the Jets are an absolute mess at this point, and like honestly, I could just see them like talking to Aaron Rodgers and like, look, if we don't feel like we got our guy in the draft, we'll bring you back next year. But if not, then we'll try and move on without you. But it just, this team gives me no hope that they're going to have this generational turnaround because, like, the Jets, like, it's not like the Lions where Detroit's tough. The Lions are actually, a cool logo, a cool team. Like, the Jets, like, you're named after a product that Boeing makes.
Yeah. Not only that, we look at who they're going after for head coach. I think when you're looking at the head coaching hires, especially for teams that are now in the search for things, makes you understand like what direction are they going in, right? Are they going offensive minded? Are they going defensive minded? We have no idea with the Jets. So far, it seems like they're just pulling names out of a hat and they're asking for interviews because we have Rex Ryan. Like, oh, well, he was good for us 15 years ago. Maybe he'll be the right fit. Oh, Riverbow Ron. Oh, 10 years ago with Cam Newton, they were pretty good. Oh, let's not interview uh, Ben Johnson. We'll let the Patriots interview him, but we're not interested. We're interested in looking at Lois Riddick, the Monday night analyst, Louis Riddick. So it's like I'm looking at the Jets, and they're also considering bringing in their interim head coach as their full-time head coach this
What?
upcoming season as well. They've
Because it worked for
interviewed
the
already.
Raiders.
What's that?
Because it worked for the Raiders. I mean, my
Yeah,
God.
I'm like, what are we thinking exactly? Because so far, all the people I've seen that they've interviewed make no sense at all. Rex Ryan, I think he was a fine head coach 15 years ago. But let's repeat 15 years ago, the first term of Barack Obama. We are now on to the second term of Donald Trump, and two presidents later. We're talking about back then when we
Three.
were using the iPod Nano to listen to music at this point on our PS3s. Yes,
Hmm.
this is how long it's been since the Jets have been a decent team. And that is the last time that Rex Ryan has coached the New York Jets. What is in the past shall stay in the past. It's ridiculous. The Jets, they are a complete disaster. And I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Rodgers came back. Because now you look at his stats in hindsight. Oh, well, 28 touchdowns. Give him an offensive line. Oh, 11 picks.
Yeah.
Well, get him a good offensive coordinator, QBR. His numbers are nearly identical to his last season in Green Bay. At this point, this is what you're going to get with Aaron Rodgers. So stop. Enough. Either let him play for the Vikings and fulfill his Brett Favre arc, or just stop. Blow this team up. Enough. I'm so tired of this Jets team. What an
No.
absolute mess.
No, you got to blow that team up. And you know what? I know someone, if you're looking at television personalities, and do the Jets strike you? Let me ask you this, as a team that needs motivation, like a lot of it.
Oh, God. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
So, like, this person, it's a lawsuit coming forward. They may get fired. And what better motivation than, you know what? If we're going for TV analysts with no coaching experience, and then they already didn't really have experience of it as being a TV analyst, why not Joy Taylor? If you're going to interview Lois Riddick, you're going to interview Rex Ryan. What better motivation is this at halftime? Like, okay, if you win the game, guess what? So, if you want
The
someone
whole
to be your
team gets
head
to hit.
coach, the whole team. I mean that was a hard hit. Like, how hard do you hit on the field is how hard you're hitting off the field, some say. So if you want to make a TV personality like Louis Riddick, or bring back someone like Rex Ryan who has coached, why not you be progressive? You could have the first female coach, and then also have Aaron Rodgers on your team. I don't know how it gets more progressive like that. It's not like you actually have useful coaches on the Jets who actually do anything. So, you know what? She may be available soon. She may be a free agent. A lot of lawsuits going on. Never stopped Deshaun Watson from getting another job in the NFL.
No, and honestly, halftime would look pretty interesting for Joy Taylor. I'll tell you what, everybody, I'll let us all hit it tonight if we get the win. They would come out in the second half, guns ablazing. They would go 17 and 0 because of Joy Taylor. So I think the Jets should consider that because Rex Ryan, been there, done that. Ron Rivera, he's got some version of CTE or at least dementia at this point. Lois Riddick,
Yeah,
not expiring at all. But Joy Taylor moves the narrative forward. Females can coach in the NFL, and she could prove all the haters wrong.
exactly. If you don't win and Joy Taylor's your head coach, the Jets must be gay. Joy Taylor's their head coach, and they can't even win games. No motivation. They have to be.
But it's just so funny to me that the Bengals get their win, the Dolphins lose, and then the Broncos just rip the hearts out for both teams and say, no, actually, we're the playoff team.
The Dolphins losing was so predictable. Like, I felt like the Dolphins losing was a lock. Like, I didn't have any feeling in my body that the Dolphins would win that game.
No, they just weren't. They started Snoop Hunley. Like, they're not going to win a game in that case. And the Jets, it's just poetic. Certain
Yeah.
times the script writes itself. Honest to
Yeah,
God.
and then Tyreek Hill after the game wants out. So now he opens up the door for the game where he's like, I really just don't want to be out there, which is funny because he took all this money to leave the Kansas City Chiefs because they know to win, you can't pay your wide receiver that much money and be a Super Bowl contender each year. And then the Dolphins also paid Miami, Tua, over $50 million a year. So it's like, of course, you're just going to be out there when you're paying a below average quarterback that much money. And then you're also paying you a 31 wide receiver top dollar in the NFL. It's like there's a reason why the Chiefs didn't want to pay you. They've been contending and you haven't been, and you can't even win in cold weather games. And it's not necessarily Tyreek Hill's fault for getting his money, but like if you get paid that much, chances are your team isn't going to be good enough to go out there and win consistently in the playoffs. But he may be out now. He's opening up the door. It felt like AJ Brown did similarly. Do you see Tyreek Hill as a lock for leaving the Miami Dolphins, or do you think he's kind of in his feelings right now?
I think he's ready to leave. I mean, he basically said goodbye to Miami in his post game press conference, saying like had a great time, but time to go. Like I think he's all but out, and I think there's plenty of teams that could be suitors for him. You mentioned Tua that they paid Tua. They also paid Jalen Waddle, and they also have Jalen Ramsey on the other side. So they have
Mm,
so many contracts that are already aging as bad contracts at this point. And getting off of Tyreek Hill's contract, which isn't necessarily a bad contract, if somebody's going to eat that contract, go ahead. Because at this point, that opens the door. Maybe we trade Tua. Maybe a team like the Titans want him, or maybe a team like I don't know. The Cardinals want to break up with Kyler. Maybe Kyler goes to the Dolphins. We don't know. Either way, I think at this point the Dolphins aren't going anywhere. Tyreek Hill, he would be much more better suited in say the Chargers uniform. He'd be a lot better in say Denver playing for the Broncos potentially. There's plenty of other teams that he could fill in and be great with, or maybe the Patriots.
the
Optimistically, they
Commanders.
get Brian Johnson and they trade for Tyreek Hill. Anything's possible at this point, but I say why not?
Yeah, I say why not too. I think he wants to contend. And I could see him wanting to play with someone like Jaden Daniels. So I feel like that could be a really good fit for Tyreek Hill. I feel like Tyreek Hill and the Commanders kind of makes sense. Can see him kind of in like the maroon uniform, either that or the Chargers. I feel like are going to be the two teams that will really go hard after him, and then Denver and New England will go after T Higgins if possible. But Joe Burrow sent a warning shot if T. Higgins leaves too, that there could be some unrest in that organization.
Oh, I mean, 100%. I think the Bengals will probably bring him back, but Joe Burrow's going to fight tooth and nail for him. Speaking of the Commanders, they have yet another great game. Last second, Terry McLaurin grab, beating the Cowboys and fulfilling the Brickyard 7-10 Cowboys record. So everybody who will see this either now or later, we were right about the Cowboys. We were right. We said 7-10, a team that had a monumental collapse against the Packers in the last playoff run, and then bringing back Mike McCarthy, despite the fact that they were outcoached by Matt LaFleur and embarrassed against his former team. We said they're not going to be a playoff team. They're going to be 7-10. And now, granted, did we say that expecting Dak Prescott to get hurt? No. But either way, even if he got hurt or either he didn't, they were 7-10. Their defense took a step back. Their offense took a step back, and they looked like they played better with Cooper Rush. And in this game, we got to see Trey Lance as well. And for me, I want to know the ninth mystery of the world, which is Trey Lance being drafted third overall. Because, good God, I can understand why Trevor Lawrence was drafted in this draft. I can understand why Zach Wilson was drafted at the time. Where the hell did Trey Lance come from in this draft, and why this career has been so cursed? The 49ers traded everything for Trey Lance. He was the answer. He was going to be their Super Bowl franchise quarterback. And he plays 8 starts for them. He goes. We don't see him for 2 years. And then this is our first sighting of Trey Lance in 2 years. And this is what we get. 20 of 34, 244. Did he play badly? I don't know if I could say he played poorly, but I cannot say he played like the guy that was drafted third overall. So to me, the enigma that is Trey Lance, who is this guy? Where did he come from in his career? I need answers. Who drafted this? Who chose to draft this guy from North Dakota State? It's an enigma to me. The Cowboys, first of all, victory lap on us being right about the Cowboys. And also Trey Lance. I can't contextualize my words for Trey Lance at this point. Maybe you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you let's see, you sleep with the right media personality's daughter, and then he talks you up to one of the teams in his state, and then they end up drafting you, and then he screws over the San Francisco 49ers and hands the Rams a ring. Inside job from Colin Cowherd? I don't know. Maybe. I'm not saying it is, but Trey Lance dates his daughter and he ends up getting drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. West Coast bias there. And then with Trey Lance, it's like, I don't know, sometimes the guy's just a bust. And for you to be the number 3 overall pick in the bust, like, it's not necessarily Trey Lance's fault. I feel like this is more of just a blemish on Kyle Shanahan's resume, if anything, because Trey Lance knew he only played one season. He's like, hey, maybe I'm not ready here. And then Kyle Shanahan suddenly created a 3 quarterback quandary in his locker room where he had Jimmy G, Trey Lance, and Brock Purdy all at the same time competing. And
Hmm.
Brock Purdy ended up beating them out, and maybe he makes up with it with that pick, but like he kind of screwed over the San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl hopes. He went out there and swung for a quarterback, but he did it in a way where you have a Super Bowl team. It's really hard to gamble on a quarterback in the draft when you already have the Super Bowl roster, especially someone like Trey Lance who only played one season. So you probably should have gone someone more veteran or just wait till the next draft because it was a bad draft. But what the Rams did instead are like, all right, let's go out and get the most accomplished quarterback who hasn't won anything and just plug him into our Super Bowl team, and then we'll be fine and get all the pieces around him. But like Trey Lance never really had a chance in San Francisco, and he was always injured. And then it seems like in Dallas, Trey Lance really isn't just. I feel like he's not really interested in being a starter anymore. It seems like he's fine just being a backup and no one hating on him all the time, so he doesn't have to hear
From guys like me. Yeah, that makes sense.
it.
But yeah, I mean, that was my big takeaway from this game. I mean, and then obviously on the Commanders side, Jaden Daniels, he's now had 5 fourth quarter drives to watch it. No, this wasn't even Jaden Daniels. What am I saying?
Marcus
This
Mariota.
was week 18 Marcus Mariota, who I think belongs in the conversation with the Peyton Mannings, with the Drew Breeses, the Phillip Rivers, the Dan Marinos of the world of who is the greatest quarterback? Are we talking about Peyton Manning or are we talking about week 18, 2024, Marcus Mariota? 15 of
I mean,
18, 161, rushes for a touchdown as well. I mean, he played about as elite as it could possibly get from Mr. Mariota.
yeah, I mean, did Peyton Manning ever throw a touchdown to himself in the playoffs? No.
No.
Marcus Mariota has. I mean, has, week 18 Mariota as far as like quarterbacks here? I feel like as far as like a backup who's come into games and played well. As much as people have loved Jameis Winston, I still feel like Marcus Mariota has come into games and played better and at least more consistently than Jameis Winston, where he's played winning football and then he ends up getting it done over the Cowboys, where you have Marcus Mariota lead you down the field to get some momentum heading into the playoffs. Jane Daniels doesn't even have to play. They just don't think that the Packers are going to go out there and beat the Bears. But it was good to see Marcus Mariota go out there and have a clutch drives, like versus, Jameis Winston had kind of a tough year this year where Mariota's kind of played pretty well everywhere he's been. And he hasn't been horrifically bad. He just hasn't been, spectacular.
Yeah. I feel like if we're looking at those two guys, because obviously they went 1 and 2, Marcus Mariota's career is probably better, but Jameis Winston's just more lovable at this point. Hard to hate
Yeah.
Jameis Winston. But Marcus Mariota, the way that he moves, I think that he's deserved to be a backup for the time being, for sure. And then let's see what else. We got Falcons and Panthers, which was an excellent final season game. Falcons needed to win this game to have a chance to make the playoffs, but Bryce Young and the Hope Core Carolina Panthers said no. Bryce Young, 3 touchdowns, 250. We got Miles Sanders getting going. We had Jalen Coker getting involved. And this Panthers team that last year was the new Cleveland Browns. Now it looks like they have something here a little bit. Dave Canales looks like he might have been the head coach that they were looking for. Get them some weapons and a better offensive line. Panthers, after this game, gives me hope for their upcoming season. What will they do? Adam Thielen, the ageless wonder that is. They went out, they won in overtime. Bryce Young played excellent, but I'm excited to see the Panthers this upcoming offseason, what they do. Can they be contending again, at least for a playoff spot?
Yeah, you know what's exciting with the Carolina Panthers this year? They have their draft pick.
Yeah, that's huge. They didn't waste their pick. They didn't trade back. They didn't miss out on Caleb Williams. And now they have a chance to maybe turn back the clock. Maybe they can make this trade not as bad as they said. If Bryce Young can be a Pro Bowl quarterback, then maybe there's hope. Because this season, I mean, he did improve quite a bit, especially after he got benched. He'll end the season with 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I mean, compared to the start of the season when he was throwing backwards, now he's throwing forwards. And yeah, I like what I've seen from Bryce Young. I think that he'll be a solid player for the future.
Yeah, I could see too someone like if the Jets decide to blow it up, go out there, get Garrett Wilson off the Jets, put him on the Panthers. I
Yeah,
feel like that'd be a good fit for them.
yeah, I can agree with that. As long as they can get some weapons for him. I love Adam Thielen, but he is getting older. They drafted Xavier Legette. He's had an up and down season. I don't think he'll be their number one. So draft somebody and then maybe go after someone established, like a Tyreek Hill, like a T. Higgins, or you mentioned Garrett Wilson. He'd be a good fit too. Or Devontae.
Yeah. Yeah, Devontae could be good. I don't know if he like fits their time frame, but he could definitely be like a good addition. It's like the two receiver there. But I like where the Panthers are headed right now, especially with Bryce Young. I mean, this was probably the most fun game of the week, and it's up there for like top games of the year where you have Michael Penix at the end of the first half. I mean, just the fact that they went back to back plays to Drake London in that game at the end of the first half. They run it the first time, he's out of bounds, kind of a fight for the ball. They run the exact same play with Drake London, the same corner, one on one again. And then Michael Penix just hits him on a dot. And I'm excited for this division over the next few years. I feel like Michael Penix, like, gave the Falcons some real juice here. He's been accurate. He's been really fun to watch. And then we're gonna have Baker coming back to defend his title here. We'll see how well he does versus the Commanders, but you know the Buccaneers could definitely get to a conference championship. It'll be a tough game versus them in Philadelphia if they end up matching up here in the next round, but just them, and then you have Atlanta, then you have Carolina, who's coming up now, and then you have a nuclear warhead going at the New Orleans Saints. I mean, this division's going to be great.
Yeah, really, it's going to be like the NFC North, where you have three teams that have a lot of promise, and then the Saints in this division. Saints are a complete disaster. Um, Falcons are exciting. I'm excited to see Michael Penix work on a little bit of his intangibles a little bit, but I do think that he throws a good ball. I think that he can be really good. They got the weapons there for him. I think Raheem Morris was a solid head coach for them. Zach Robinson was a decent offensive coordinator. Being able to utilize their weapons a little bit better than Arthur Smith did, Falcons are in for a good future ahead of them. But the
Yeah,
Saints, dude, they had to play football too. And Baker, Bucky Irving, Mike Evans
Bucky
get
Irving.
involved as well.
Mike, he did it. He didn't just get involved. Love. Yeah, this made my day when they're like, you know what, we could take a knee, but let's get this guy $3 million. I mean, the fact that they went out there, made the owner pay out $3 million to Mike Williams. All he needed was 5 yards, and the Saints ended up letting him get it in this game. They're like, yeah, whatever, let this man get his money. But like tying now for the record for 1,000 yard seasons in a row, and then also getting a $3 million bonus in this game. Bucky Irving going off. I mean, it was stellar stuff for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it made me excited that they actually went for it instead of just taking a knee. It just felt like it would have been so anticlimactic. Like, you're really going to cost this guy $3 million, and Baker's like, no way.
No, and I mean, if we wanted to be those, the old heads and say, "Oh, well, did he actually deserve the same streak because of the extra game and then that last play?" I don't want to hear it. Getting
He
him
got
that play,
injured.
getting him three. Yeah, he got injured too. He missed 3 games. Did it in 14 games. Getting him the ball. I mean, this is what we love about sports, and this is what we love about the NFL. Even though the game was already solidified, getting him his yards, getting him his 1,000 yards, like this was just good for the NFL. This was good for the Bucks, and gives them a little bit of momentum when they go and face the Commanders this upcoming week, getting him involved. So I like to see it. And then the Saints, I don't care. The Saints started Clyde Edwards-Helaire
Yeah.
today, so they're not on my good
MVS
side.
was really out there though.
There's a serious conversation going around the internet. Do we prefer to see prime Randy Moss or MVS from week 12 on this past season? This is going to be a debate that's going to be in the bars for the next 20 years. Who had the greatest peak? I honestly think MVS week 12 on might have been that guy.
I mean, isn't it Super Bowl champion MVS? Is it Super Bowl champion Randy Moss? Did MVS melt down in the Super Bowl, or did Randy Moss melt down in the Super Bowl versus the Giants? You tell me.
Yeah, this guy came out of nowhere. We forgot that he even played in the NFL at this point. Goes to the Saints, has multiple touchdown games. He had the game against the Falcons where he had 3 catches for 100 yards and a 67-yard bomb. And then the Cleveland game, he had another 71-yard touchdown. And he's just getting involved in this past game. For MVS standards, he was resting his legs. He's like, I'm not as young as I once was. Next year, I'll come back here and match Randy Moss again. But prime MVS against as the Saints' number one receiver after Rashid
Yeah.
Shaheed's gone, we love to see it.
No, he's going to be a great Patriot next year.
He probably will be. Speaking of the Patriots, Patriots, Patriots. They needed to lose. They needed to tank. And there's teams that I've talked about on the worst top 5 that got absolutely eviscerated because they failed to tank correctly. The Patriots, about to clinch the 1 seed or number 1 overall pick. All they have to do is suck. And yes, they were going to trade down most likely and get some draft capital, but they said no. Our pride, our ego, we're going to start Joe Milton. Joe Milton's going to go absolutely parabolic and look like prime Cam Newton against this Bills team. And they lose out on the number 1 overall pick. They are now the 4th pick, a place that they could have traded down. And all the teams in front of them at this point were all teams that were going for a quarterback. The Titans, the Giants, the Browns. They could have made a trade to get some additional assets. Maybe they get another first-round pick. Maybe they get a couple of seconds or thirds. We don't know the exact compensation. But the Patriots could have done that. And all they needed to do was lose because that's what they've done really well all year. Lose. But now they have the 4th overall pick. They'll probably take Travis Hunter. Gerard Mayo, he has a cardboard box outside of Gillette Stadium trying to get some spare change. The Patriots lose out on the number 1 overall pick. They're now the 4th overall pick. And Gerard Mayo has packed his bags officially. Are you happy that they won? Joe Milton looked good, or the Patriots idiots at this point?
I mean, honestly, it's really hard to lose to Mitch Trubisky. Like,
He makes it hard.
like that's a tall task. Like, you're going up against Buffalo. Josh Allen played 1 drive, and he's like, "Okay, I got my starting streak. I'm out." And then he left the game. And then Mitchell Trubisky came into the game, and you have Joe Milton, who looked better than Mitchell Trubisky has at any point in his career. He's out there throwing dimes. He's like, "Hey, this is my audition to play somewhere else next season because I look like a really good quarterback." And some people think he's been a good quarterback in college here, and a lot of people said he's looked like what Anthony Richardson was supposed to look like, where he had better accuracy. He was athletic in this game. He has a strong arm and a good deep ball. Like, Joe Milton has a lot of potential, and he showed that on Sunday. Who doesn't have a lot of potential, who's useless, who doesn't have a lot of accuracy downfield, who's now an older running quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky. Like, this is a tough quarterback to lose to, and it kind of sums up the Patriots season. And they don't really need a quarterback. Tennessee, do you keep Will Levis? No, you don't keep Will Levis. I mean, if the Cardinals moved off from Josh Rosen that fast, but like, you're not necessarily a team that needed the 1st overall pick because you're not desperate to go out there and get a quarterback. It would give you leverage and you can trade back, but you're still in a good enough position where you're probably going to get your first choice you would want anyways, with where you are in the draft. But if it got Gerard Mayo fired, hey man, good enough. But like, it's just hard to lose to Mitch Trubisky.
See, what I think kills me about this Gerard Mayo story is all the people who are saying, "Oh, Gerard Mayo didn't get a fair shake. Oh, Patriots fired him because they're racist. Oh, Gerard Mayo didn't deserve this. He deserves another opportunity." To all of those, I say, no, 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 and no. Because, for one, Gerard Mayo should have never been the head coach. They didn't even interview after a 25-year history with Bill Belichick. Not a single interview with anybody except for Gerard Mayo to be your head coach. Why? I don't know. And then you have Mike Vrabel available. You have Ben Johnson available. And literally every other coach that's about to get hired this upcoming season, except for maybe someone that the Jets hire, are probably going to be better head coaches than Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo to me is closer to Jeff Saturday as head coach than he is to Mike Vrabel. And if you're looking at a team that has $130 million in cap space with the fourth overall pick with their franchise quarterback, and you don't know for sure if your head coach is going to develop into being a good head coach, then maybe he's not the head coach. Having a head coach is not like having a rookie quarterback. You don't develop your head coach. Your head coach develops your quarterback. And the fact that people are sitting here today talking about, oh, he didn't get a fair shake. Oh, he got fired because he was black. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. Gerard Mayo was not a good head coach. The only two games that you can give him credit for winning were the Bengals in September and then this Bills game against Mitch Trubisky. The two games in between, they don't matter at this point. They were terrible all season. Their offense was bad. Their defense got worse. I don't want to hear it about Gerard Mayo. Maybe he can be a defensive coordinator somewhere, but he was never supposed to be the head coach. Should have been anybody else. And now they get to reset with a better head coach. They made the right choice. Everyone, shut the fuck up, please.
Yeah, no. I mean, this guy went from being a linebackers coach to being the head coach. I mean, really? And if this is like a team like you had Bill Belichick, who's like the greatest head coach, but like people crying like, "Oh, racist." It's like, no, not really, not really. It's Gerard Mayo, and he seemed clueless throughout the year. And New England has their issues. Like they definitely had their issues when Cam Newton is there, but Gerard Mayo, I can assure you, is not the case. We still have, Joe Mazzulla in Boston. We have Alex Cora, and guess what? When they're winning, no one really cares. But when they're losing, like Boston cares. And that's really the through line with Boston sports. It's like, if you're winning, I don't care. If you're losing, we move on. The Bruins have moved on from how many managers now in the first year? They got rid of Bruce Cassidy after being the best record. They won the President's Cup and they still moved on from him because there are issues in the playoffs. And like with Gerard Mayo, it's like he simply did not deserve to be there, didn't deserve to get hired. I would have rather them hire someone like Brian Flores instead of him, who has been with the team, who has been within the division, if you're going to go off the Patriots tree here. But, I thought you should have really considered Mike Vrabel last year than this year, and maybe your team's in a totally different position. And I thought this was kind of just a setting you back, and they almost did it as a favor to Belichick. Like, yeah, I guess we'll try it out for a year. We'll get a top draft pick here, kind of mess around a little bit. But for the Patriots, he was never the guy there. He went from a linebackers coach with the Patriots to suddenly now he's the head coach. It's like suddenly it's just you go from being someone who doesn't speak a native language of a country, but you're suddenly on the board of an energy company in another country just because your parents in a powerful position. Like, just didn't feel like he was the right coach for the job.
No, and especially coming off of Bill Belichick, I always felt like if you're going to move off of somebody as iconic as Bill Belichick, maybe you want to change, or if you're going to keep a similar identity, put it in a guy that's already proven. Gerard Mayo, as you mentioned, only as a linebackers coach, but also that's it. And there's also within the Patriots. So really it's just an extended, it's basically just a linebacker that isn't playing at this point. And I do think that he could be a fine coordinator somewhere. You want to make him as a linebackers coach elsewhere, maybe make him a DC? Sure, maybe then. But at this point, he proved that he's not ready to be a head coach. Maybe he'll get his opportunity again someday, but he'll earn it at this point. He was basically just the next in charge for the Patriots. He was like the Prince Belichick at this point, and you gave him the role because that's what Belichick said. As if Belichick himself isn't conniving and manipulative and low-key a little psychotic at this point. He's like, yeah, I'm going to give him Gerard Mayo because he's probably not going to be a great head coach. I'm going to sabotage the Patriots for the year. Um, it's not the end of the world. And them firing after 1 year, after all the mishaps he said on the mic, all the times when he called his team soft? Do we not forget when he called his entire team soft? All the miscommunications he said, where he's like, "Yeah, we should probably use Drake May more." I agree, but then he just doesn't use Drake May more. Like, no, he was an idiot. He was over his head, and God wish him, his next opportunity. But it's not going to be in the NFL for a while.
Yeah. No. Maybe he'll get another coordinator job, but I feel like that was the best line we've heard all year as from any NFL commentator, which is he's basically a linebacker who's not playing anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. Deep analysis for Mr. Jameson, as you can always
No,
expect in the Brickyard.
no, that's the best line of all I've heard all year. No, he's a linebacker who's not playing. Like when you think about it, like technically, yeah, that's exactly what he is.
Nobody can say I'm wrong in that case. Speaking of
No.
players who are packing their bags, though, Jags and Colts, we saw the last game of Doug Peterson's coaching career in Jacksonville. He packed his bags. He's going to go on Indeed today, maybe Monster, and try to apply for some jobs. Maybe Taco Bell is hiring. We don't know. His time in Jacksonville was extremely underwhelming. I mean, good God. You had the number one overall pick. We got talent around them. They got Christian Kirk and a number of others, Calvin Ridley, and they did nothing with him. 3 years, they were 9-8, 9-8, and now 4-13. Not only that, the year before that, they had an absolutely monumental collapse. They were 7-4 and ended the season 8-9, absolutely crashing out. And then this season, it's just pathetic all around for a team that's supposed to be good offensively. They struggled all season. Understand they had injuries, but this has come to a crashing halt. The Jags are now the fifth overall pick. They fire him. On the other side, the Colts, they fire Gus Bradley. I'm assuming after the Giants game, they had that in their mind, but Doug Peterson gone from the Jags.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Doug Peterson, I mean, he looks like an accountant for a car wash. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. And he went to Jacksonville. They at one point were almost the one seed, had almost there, and then you got to the playoffs, and then you kind of got worse every single year, which is really not the direction you want to go. With the head coach Trevor's gotten banged up. He really wasn't able to bring the best out of Trevor Lawrence. And the whole thing with Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars can be summed up with, well, that was weird. That was
Yeah.
weird. Like you got to the playoffs, they're like, oh, this team's turning around. Doug Peterson, Super Bowl head coach. Maybe he was a good coach with Philadelphia and they didn't get lucky. And then the guy, like, it's so strange. Like he's the same guy who outcoached Tom Brady in a game here, and then he goes to Jacksonville, almost beats the Chiefs, and then you're almost the number one seed. Then Trevor gets hurt. Trevor gets banged up again this year, and you fall out of the playoffs, but you started out 2-7 anyways, and then you kind of just keep getting worse every year. It's like I don't really know what to make of Doug Peterson at this point. I mean, he won a Super Bowl. They had a really good team, but like how much of that and you also had Frank Reich on that staff, who was also a terrible head coach. And then you had Jonathan Gannon, who went on to also be a terrible head coach as well. I believe he was with that regime here as the defensive coordinator. No, you had Jim Schwartz was your defensive coordinator there with the Philadelphia Eagles, but like just a very weird head coach to like put your
Yeah.
thumb on.
Yeah, because if you take out the Super Bowl year, the year that everyone could have mocked up with your MVP quarterback getting hurt, his backup filling in, and going on an absolute tear. Literally the Nick Foles generational run that we've only seen once in our lifetime. If you take out the 13-3 year where they win the Super Bowl, they beat the Patriots in a high scoring shootout. Every other season, it's 7-9, 9-7, 9-7, 4-11, 9-8, 9-8, 4-13. So if you remove that there, he was 22-29 with the Jaguars, and then outside of that big season with the Eagles, he was pretty much 9-8. But at this point, like that 2017 season's looking a lot more fluky. I understand they had injuries with the Eagles that kind of derailed them a little bit. Their whole receiver core got banged up. They didn't have any receivers for Carson Wentz. Then he goes to Jacksonville. They start hot, they get banged up. They beat the Chargers in that massive collapse with Brandon Staley. And then, yeah, it's just been an ongoing downward spiral. They end the season last season going losing 6 of the last 7 games. And then this season, they're just a complete shell of themselves. A team that I think could have easily been at least a 7 or 8 win team with the talent around them. And it's just been a complete disaster. Offense looks pathetic. So I honestly think that now at this point, I used to think Doug Peterson was a good head coach. Starting to think he's just an average head coach at this point.
Yeah, and he won a Super Bowl, which is the tough part with Nick Foles. Like, it's such a dream scenario because there's like a lot of good head coaches that haven't won a Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan, looking at you. And it's like not for lack of opportunities here. So I do think he's going to get another chance somewhere, and maybe Jacksonville's just a dysfunctional organization because it felt like they'd got unlucky with their free agents, where Calvin Ridley doesn't work out. Then you have to go out there and sign Gabe Davis. And then you get lucky with BTJ. Trayvon Walker is kind of the beginning of the end for this team because that he had the number one overall pick and then he royally messed it up, and that could have gone another way. But it's just like a mess, and I don't know if anyone can really just come into the Jaguars and fix them. Maybe you get someone like a Ben Johnson that comes in and can fix Trevor Lawrence and build his confidence the same way he did with Jared Goff, because I feel like a lot of people think that Trevor Lawrence has the potential to be better than Jared Goff, and he should be, but he just hasn't been. He's just kind of been Brock Osweiler with long hair.
Yeah, he really has. Whoever they have next, it needs to be an offensive minded head coach, and it needs to be a guy that's at the top of the game. Now, whoever that might be, I have a feeling they're probably going to end up just having Matt Nagy as their head coach, most likely. Who, by the way, is
Oh,
that's another person that I saw that was interviewing for the Jets. You want to speak about the Jets? They're interviewing Matt Nagy. Um, the Jags, they need an offensive minded guy because at this point, you've paid Trevor at this point. You're stuck with Trevor for at least the next few years. You need someone that's going to maximize his ability. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is a horrible quarterback, but we need somebody that's going to maximize him. You have BTJ, who it looks like he's an excellent receiver. He's been the best rookie wide receiver, arguably. You have Christian Kirk there still, and Gabe Davis is a fine 3 at this point, which is what we said 3 years ago. So they still have a talented team around them. It's just who's going to maximize their talent at this point is what they got to figure out.
yeah, who's gonna be able to put together a defense too? And then maybe you do go with someone like a Mike Vrabel who can fix your defense. You're like, we already have BTJ. We're gonna get the hell away from Travis Etienne, keep Tanks Bisbee on this team, and ride it out with Trevor because we were stupid enough to pay him, and then everyone else can go. Like you have three guys you need to keep: BTJ, Tank Bigsby, and Trevor Lawrence because you paid him. If you didn't pay Trevor, you could have moved on and started over this year and gotten a top draft pick, but you didn't decide to do that. So if it doesn't work out with Trevor, then okay, now we can ruin Arch Manning's career after that if it doesn't work out.
Oof, I would hate that actually. That would be disgraceful. Well, I mean, speaking about the AFC South, I mean, the Titans have claimed the number one overall pick. Will Levis's days in Tennessee are probably numbered. We're going to see either Cam Ward or Shador Sanders go to the Titans, most likely. But it's kind of a swan song. I mean, Will Levis, he's like the best worst quarterback this year at this point. He had so many memeable moments, so many plays where you're like, wow, this guy is excellent. But also so many plays where you're like, you're actually an idiot. And this season, I mean, 13 touchdowns, 12 picks, pretty Jameis-esque if you ask me. He threw for 2,000 yards, but he was benched through half the season, so he was on pace for about 4,000 yards. One of the most excellent train wrecks I've ever seen play at the quarterback position. And truly, he's going to have a mark on my heart when it's all over. And where he goes, we don't know, but Tennessee, the end of the Will Levis era. Really sad to see.
Yeah, it's tough. Did you see the play at the end of the game too, where he like threw it between four defenders and get the touchdown?
That's Will
Like
Levis.
it
That's Will
sums
Levis.
Will Levis up so perfectly. And then, Titans are going to move on, get a quarterback there, but I think we'll see Will Levis thrive somewhere else, at least as a backup. If you're someone like Dallas or you're someone like Miami, can't you just see Will Levis in Miami just coming in for Tua and then balling out under Mike
Yeah.
McDaniels, who probably is going to get fired after next season here, or may still be fired. We don't know yet, but I do want to see Will Levis kind of make that backup roundabout, and he could just be a bigger, stronger Ryan Fitzpatrick. You never know.
I think that it's the situation that he was in Tennessee. They don't have great weapons. Their running game was not great either. Their defense wasn't excellent. Like this team was bound to suck. So he was somewhat of their sacrificial lamb. I think that now he goes somewhere else, plays as the backup. Maybe he gets an opportunity somewhere. But I don't think his career is completely over. I think he'll find some place to call home eventually. But a couple other games here. We got Caleb Williams and the Bears breaking their 11-game losing streak for a team that started off 5-2 and then losing the next 10 games straight. They end the season on a high note, beating up Jordan Love enough so that he leaves the game, and Malik Willis comes into the game and plays fine. But they get the win. I mean, it was a close game, and it's a hell of a lot more to Chicago than it did Green Bay, but they get their win. They end their season on a high note. Um, the Bears, any hope for them as they look for their new head coach? They are interviewing Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn in Detroit. And then there's a couple other
Both,
names that are floating around
both
there
of
as
them.
well. Yeah, they're interested in both.
Make up your mind, offense or defense. Pick one. Like honestly, we need someone to fix. We need someone to fix Caleb Williams. And I know you tried to go offense with Matt Nagy and it didn't work out, but like I don't know. I don't want to see Aaron Glenn or Ben Johnson in the NFC North. Sorry, I just don't want to see that. I feel like if he doesn't go the Patriots, Mike Vrabel will be the best fit there. He can fix the defense, and also he's produced head coaches at the offensive coordinator position, whether it's someone like Matt LaFleur or Arthur Smith. Like coaches have gotten hired under his wing here, so I feel like he's definitely someone who can change the mentality of that team. But like New York, Chicago just needs someone like Dan Campbell to come in there and exercise some demons. And I think if you do get the right coach, you can succeed, but we need to stop talking about Pete Carroll. We're interviewing both of the Lions coordinators at this point for head coaching jobs. Like, all right, slow down, buddy, and just take a breath, decide if you want someone offensively or defensively, if you're going to go with a younger head coach or a first time head coach. But like, I feel like Chicago can be fixed. They have the potential. They just need to figure out the offensive line, the run game. Cause like Caleb Williams, like, had a pretty similar year to Jaden Daniels. He had a bad offensive line. He was kind of set up to fail this season in retrospect, because if you're not sure about Matt Eberflus being your head coach, I don't get what the trend was this season of teams experimenting with head coaches and their quarterbacks this season. Whether it was last season with Frank Reich and Bryce Young, whether it was this season with Gerard Mayo and Drake May, whether it was Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers in his first year there, or whether it was Matt Eberflus, who you knew you were going to fire, and Caleb Williams. Like, why are we experimenting where, oh, we don't know if we want to keep this guy going into the season, so let's just punt on our first year with our number one pick at quarterback?
With a generational guy that's was compared to the Patrick Mahomes of the world, the Trevor Lawrences, the Andrew Lucks. Like, no, this was disgraceful. And then another person that I forgot to mention is interested or in the talks with the Bears is Mike McCarthy,
Oh,
a guy who coached the Packers with Aaron Rodgers and then with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys as well. He's technically a free agent because the Cowboys have not brought him back, but the Bears might interview Mike McCarthy this upcoming week to see if he's the right fit for the Chicago Bears job. If we can joke about the Jets and their head coaching hires, I think the Bears are in a really similar scenario where it's like the Bears actually have talent. Their defense, they have talent there. Their offense has talent there. All they need is the right coach, and they're looking at Mike McCarthy, and they're looking at all these other rogue agents for their uh, head coaching position. And it's like, are you just trying to ruin Caleb Williams completely, or is this just purely based on just idiocy? I don't know if they're tied to anybody else, but these are the names that are floating around at this point after everything. And I'm like, this is why these teams continue to suck. year in and year out. And at this point, it the poor stay poor. Essentially, that's what
Who's
happens.
next? Doug Peterson of the Cowboys?
Doug Peterson of the Cowboys. What about? Can you see Doug Peterson on the Bears? I can.
No,
I can
you
see them
can.
coaching him. I can
I
see him
feel
on the
like
Bears.
I feel like when the Bears hire like a bad like old coach, it's like a defensive guy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know. It's a mess. All I know is they're in the worst division for a team that's rebuilding because you have three teams that are all Super Bowl contenders right now, and you're the Bears. Like it's just not fair. It's the AFC North, but probably honestly worse because these three teams are all firing on the highest cylinder. So it's going to be tough for whoever they have. They need to fix Caleb Williams, or at least just get his confidence back. This season shattered his confidence with how much they lost all year.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still like over 3,000 yards. His touchdowns are similar to like Jane Daniels, so he wasn't that far off. Jane Daniels was just on a winning team, and that was the big difference. But they had similar stats, like overall. Like he didn't have a terrible year by any stretch of the imagination, and he was under fire a lot. They had a bad offensive line. D Swift is useless after week 7. I mean, there's a reason why you lost 10 straight. It's like the same effect that the Philadelphia Eagles had last year when they continued to lose at the end of the year. Well, who's the common player in that scenario? Oh yeah, D Swift. If you have D Swift on your team, you're gonna suck after week 10. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, honestly, you're right. Yeah, Caleb Williams, his numbers weren't bad. 20 touchdowns, 6 picks, 3,500 passing yards. He got sacked 68 times. 68
Oh my
times
god.
Caleb Williams got sacked. That is
Andrew Luck
abuse for
shit.
the sport game. Yeah, that's some Andrew Luck shit. They need to get his offensive line right, and they need to get him standing upright because when he was protected well, he played good. He had a couple of good games in there. So there's hope. Let's see, a couple more games to go over here. Chargers and Raiders. Raiders finally decide to lose a game. And then the Chargers, we saw Quentin Johnson had a big game. Justin Herbert, they solidified the 5 seed. They will be facing the Texans that we'll go over on Wednesday night. But Chargers beat the Raiders. Very exciting.
Yeah, no, they beat the Raiders in this game, and you head into the playoffs with some momentum. The Raiders have a bright spot with Brock Bowers, but like, you go out there, beat the Raiders, divisional opponent. That's always, a fluky game. We saw how the Saints scared the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so it's never really easy to go into that environment, especially with how Tampa struggled early. The Raiders kind of made it interesting at first here, and then the Chargers kind of just slammed the door shut. Like, no, we want the privilege of playing the Houston Texans in the first round of the playoffs and basically locking in a playoff win if you don't choke and turn back into the Chargers here. So I think this sets the Chargers up in a good position. And then the Raiders, you had Brock Bowers and you had your opportunity at the number 1 pick and you blew it. So maybe you still get someone like Shador. Maybe you can still go up there and get someone like a Cam Ward, but probably you're going to be left with the third option now at quarterback.
Yeah, so they're probably going to get Jalen Monroe, or it's going to be Quinn Ewers going to Vegas, unfortunately. Speaking of teams that are looking at quarterbacks, the Giants and their catastrophic season, the city of New York in absolute shambles. Drew Lock did not have his Hall of Fame game that we saw a few weeks back. He falls to the Tanner McKee led Eagles. Eagles resting their starters. We did see a Will Shipley sighting and a Kenneth Gainwell sighting, which was nice. But the Giants, the big news from this game to me is the fact that the Giants are bringing back Brian Dayball and their GM Andrew Shulin, the guy that was in the Hard Knocks off season where we saw him let Saquon Barkley walk and go to your division rival, rush for 2,000 yards because you paid Daniel Jones, and then you cut Daniel Jones in the middle of the season, who is now playing in a playoff game this upcoming week against the Rams. So to me, I don't know why you keep your GM. Your GM has proven to be an absolute idiot. Now, if you want to keep Brian Dayball, whatever, see what he can do with this rookie quarterback you guys end up getting, who will either be Shador or Cam Ward, most likely, because you have the second overall pick. how do you feel about Brian Daboll returning as the head coach?
I don't care at this point. It's like, can I get angry about it? Not really. Can I be upset about them bringing back Brian Dable? Can we see what he can do without Daniel Jones? Okay. Now you can finally go out there, try and get a quarterback, draft a quarterback. Maybe Aaron Rodgers is like, oh, I'll take Devontae Adams across the street with Malik Neighbors, and then we'll try that out in New York because they have a good defense. So all they need is a quarterback because we have Malik Neighbors, and if we bring in Devontae Adams, then everything will work out in our favor because we're just one quarterback away. Heard that so many times before. And now with Brian Daboll coming back, it's like, okay, give him one more year, I guess, to find his guy. But it's like it's also his fault that Daniel Jones got paid. Like he didn't need to vouch for Daniel Jones to get his contract, and he's the one responsible for winning a playoff game with Daniel Jones. Like that was honestly the most irresponsible thing he enabled as a head coach. And now you won coach of the year, and every single year you've kind of gotten worse with the Giants since.
Yeah, they've gone worse, and this offense this year was abysmal. And I understand that there were some injuries and there were some changes at quarterback, but this team has been just pathetic all year. And now maybe they pick their guy. Maybe Shador or Cam Ward is the guy that they want them to be, but I don't love it. At least their GM. I think their GM should be fired. Brian Daboll, who cares?
Yeah, who
Um,
cares?
we had a Jimmy Garoppolo sighting, the porn star. Haven't seen him in a while. He came out, played against the Seahawks. Seahawks did get the win, but porn star Jimmy, did he play good enough to maybe find a starting job somewhere, or is his days as the starter over?
Oh, they're done. They're so far done. Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't want that smoke of being a starter. He's fine just living in LA, being a backup and enjoying the beautiful women of LA. He doesn't need a back. He doesn't need a start anymore. And he came in, played well, and he's like good enough to be a backup, but I don't think anyone's really going to take him seriously as a starter in the NFL. He's had his time, got to a Super Bowl, has been severely injured. He sat for a while behind Brady, so he's older than his years that he actually has played. Like, I don't think anyone's interested. And if you are interested in him being a starter, it's going to be the exact same thing that happened with the Raiders this year when they're interested in Gardner Minshew being the starter.
Yeah, he'll be a sacrificial lamb, basically. Jacoby Brissett for the Patriots, same idea. He is 33 now, so this might be the last we see of Jimmy Garoppolo potentially in the NFL.
Just
Potentially.
going to hang around for like 7 more years for no reason. And then you're going to
Oh
be
yeah.
like, when did he sign with the Packers?
Wait, since when is he a Saint? Who would have thought?
Literally.
And then speaking of the AFC, the NFC West, the Cardinals in a game that doesn't matter. Kyler Murray pads his stats a little bit. We got to see the bald-headed assassin return to our football screens where they play, and Josh Dobbs did Josh Dobbs things as you would expect. But the Cardinals, I mean, they end the season 8-9. Jonathan Gannon is most likely returning to the Cardinals this upcoming year. In this season, we were right about the Cardinals, their ebbs and flows that we expected to have. Um, are you optimistic for the Cardinals moving forward as far as their direction, or are they just a team that's lost at sea?
No, I'm not interested in the Cardinals moving forward with Kyler Murray. And like it's exactly how you put it. As long as you have Kyler Murray, you're going to be a team that's lost at sea because congratulations, you have the modern day Jay Cutler on your team. It's almost like I said that 3 years ago on this show, and it was when he was towards the peak when they were 7-0. It's like he honestly just strikes me as Jay Cutler, where he just doesn't seem like he cares that much about winning. He seems like he likes the lifestyle, likes collecting his check, but does he really care about being in the playoffs and winning? It's like not every quarterback has that drive. And with Kyler Murray, he's a shorter quarterback who has some injury issues and durability issues. This is probably the best year as far as just durability for Kyler Murray. But like when your quarterback can't see over his offensive line and you lose some games because of that, that's an issue. So I don't think you're ever going to be great with Kyler Murray. And like Cliff Kingsbury tried his best, put the perfect team around him, and got absolutely wrecked in the first round.
Yeah, I can agree. I think this might be the year that we see him potentially be traded. I have a feeling it's going to be after the draft, after a team might have missed out on their quarterback. They still want to compete. So I do think there will be suitors. Maybe Pittsburgh wants to take him on if Russell
Oh,
Wilson moves on. Um, but other than that, I think that he's going to stay where he is. They're going to be the same old Cardinals and just be competing for third place in that division,
yeah, maybe second.
unfortunately.
Ooh, could be frisky if
Ooh,
Matt Stafford retires, and then he could be second place in that division if the 49ers don't pull their together.
yeah, that's true. But that was all of the games in week 18. We now look to Super Wild Card Weekend. And we'll be previewing these games on Wednesday. But just a quick preview here. Got Chargers, Texans. Great matchup. CJ Stroud versus Justin Herbert. We got classic AFC North, Steelers, Ravens. We got Bo Nix, Sean Payton versus Sean McDermott, Josh Allen. Packers, Eagles, Jaden Daniels versus Baker Mayfield, and ending with the Vikings and Rams, Sam Darnold versus Matt Stafford. I mean, playoff time is here, baby.
It's here. It's the most exciting time of the year. It's when we find out who the real winners are and who the pretenders are. And we're probably going to see a lot of people melt down in the playoffs. And people forget playoff football is the great equalizer. Just because you played spectacular in the regular season and went 14-3 doesn't mean it's going to translate to the playoffs. And because you had a great year and didn't turn the ball over in the regular season doesn't mean you're not going to do that in the playoffs. Like, every single detail is going to matter. It's going to come down to coaching. It's going to come down to quarterbacks making a play or the plays that they don't make here. So I feel like it's going to be exciting. Not the greatest first round of games here, I will admit, but when you kind of don't think the games are going to be great, that's kind of when the NFL will surprise you because they're the best league in sports. And Mark Cuban famously said 10 years ago that the NFL is going to go extinct. Well, now we're looking at a super wild card weekend where the NFL has added a game. They've added Monday Night Football and they've also taken over Christmas and taken that away from the NBA. And then Mark Cuban has to look at it now where the NBA is kind of collapsing and viewership has been an issue for them, and so has attendance in the regular season. So, kind of look how that take has aged back in 2014 for him.
Yeah, and now at this point, the NFL was king, and now they've continued to be king, and now they're going competing directly with the NFL, competing with college football, and now it looks like they have their unofficial minor league system, which is essentially college at this point with an NIL and whatnot. So the NFL is stronger than ever, and now we have on the opposite side with college football being essentially the draft essentially before the
Yeah.
draft, getting them exposure there. And then the NBA, they don't really have that same product there. The G League has failed, and then it just seems like there's a lot less interest in the NBA than ever before. Whether it's the mirage of threes they might have, or whether it's with the players not playing like they should, but it seems like the NBA is in a much worse situation than the NFL at this point.
Yeah, because I feel like with the NBA, it's just like, why would I want to spend $500 and if you have to take your family to go to the game, to go to a game where it doesn't even seem like the players care about it?
Yeah, and maybe there's too many games in the regular season. I don't know exactly what it is, but all I know is that it doesn't make for a good product for the NBA right now. They have to adapt. But we talked about all the games in Week 18. We've talked about briefly the playoff brackets that will, but you see the documents here getting unraveled here. The final worst top five of the regular season for the Brickyard. We're here to break it down. Let's talk about who's not included. I'm going to include the teams that are tanking successfully. So the Titans will be excluded from this list for the fact that they know what they needed to do. They needed to lose and they needed the Patriots to win. So therefore, Tennessee Titans have set up for their future. The Cleveland Browns are not here either because they also tanked successfully as well. So credits to them. At number five, I have to include a person who has zero legs, someone who has actually killed the city of San Francisco. That's right. At this point, with all the teams that are out, we know who's bad and who's not. How about Jake Moody at number five, who might go down as the worst NFL kicker of all time? I have never seen a man miss as many kicks as this man has on a consistent basis and still have a job. It kills me. Jake Moody, I'm going to look at his field goal percentage while we're talking here because it cannot be any higher than 70%. Good Lord. And not only that, he also misses extra points. The amount of games that he has lost for the San Francisco 49ers is just absurd. Oh, what did I say? Field goal percentage, 70% for
Oh,
Jake Moody. Absolutely pathetic. This guy is trash. I don't ask for people's jobs many often, but Jake Moody, go ahead, learn some Chinese and go work for the Shanghai Sharks. I'm over it.
ni hao.
Then at number 4, I have Carson Wentz. And yes, maybe this is not fair to say to a backup quarterback, but you had one job, okay? We needed the Dolphins to lose. They did well. They sucked. They're out. They needed the Broncos to lose. The Broncos had other plans. Carson Wentz scores as many points as we do on Sunday. 0 points. Does absolutely nothing. Doesn't even get 100 yards passing. For a guy that was supposed to be the hero for the city of Cincinnati and the NFL, we could have seen Joe Burrow versus Josh Allen in the first round, but instead we see nothing. We see Bo Nix, which you know what is fine in its own right. But shame on Carson Wentz, the hero that we asked for did not don the cape in Week 18. You're on the worst top 5. Then at number 3, a team. If I'm going to obliterate the Giants for not tanking successfully, if I'm going to obliterate the Raiders for not tanking successfully, how about the Kings of not tanking successfully? The New England Patriots at number 3. All you needed to do was lose, and you're so good at losing. You guys, all you do is lose the last 3 seasons in New England. But instead, Joe Milton looked like prime Michael Vick in this game, running all over the field, making absolute laser throws, splitting up the Bills' defense, completely ruining their chance at the number 1 overall pick. They will now be picking 4, most likely getting Travis Hunter. Patriots, the worst at tanking, the worst at winning football games, and worst of all, the worst fans in maybe all of the NFL. At number 2, I have the city of New York. That's right. Whether it's the Jets, whether it's the Giants, or whether it's your other sports teams that suck, i.e., the Knicks, i.e., the Yankees blowing a World Series lead, whatever it might be, the city of New York is an absolute shambles. At this point, they wish that Godzilla would come to town and wreck this village for what they have done at this point. The Jets, whether it's going after Ron Rivera or whether it's Rex Ryan, their coaching hires, setting them up for failure in the future. And then the Giants, their GM that purposely let Saquon Barkley walk only to have the best season in running backs history, maybe since Adrian Peterson at this point. Same on the city of New York. The Giants are pathetic, and so are the Jets. City of New York, the Big Apple is now turning into a moldy crap of turds. And then
Oh,
to top off the worst top 5s, how about the September Bengals? Yes, I'm going to put the September Bengals here because God forbid you couldn't have beaten the Patriots in week 1, which would have benefited both of you because you would have been in the playoffs had you beat them in week 1. Maybe if you didn't have the worst defense in all of football for 99% of the season. But worst of all, you prevented Joe Burrow from being in the conversation for MVP because you guys are 9-8. Joe Burrow throws for nearly 5,000 yards, has 46 touchdowns, has the best season of his career. But it's ruined because you can't beat the fucking Patriots, who are on the worst top 5s, because you get blown out by the Eagles, because you let the Steelers drop 44 points on you, continuously playing terrible defense. Goodbye, Lou Anarumo. But the problem is, if we're talking about the worst teams of all, it's the teams that tease us. The Bengals. They were so good in this second stretch of games. Jamar Chase had the triple crown, and all because you can't play in September. You guys are going to be watching from the couches like the rest of us. The Bengals deserve to be the worst team according to the Brickyard.
yeah, and they definitely do because I've been trying to explain, like, they lost to the Patriots and that's why they're not in the playoffs. And people are like, oh, it's one game. Let's go through like the bad games that Lamar and Josh Allen have had. It's like, yeah, it's one game, but it's the reason why you're out of the playoffs. All you had to do is beat one of the worst teams in the league competing for the number 1 pick. Boom, you're in the playoffs. And not only do you have to beat them, you just have to beat them with Jacoby Brissett starting. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
In Gerard Mayo's first game coaching and you only score 10 points, it's like, That's why they're the worst team according to the Brickyard, because they were the biggest upside with the biggest downside of any team this year, because they could have gone out there and made some noise in the playoffs, but we got robbed of that opportunity. And you can blame Zach Taylor, you can blame the Bengals offense in September, but it's like this, oh yeah, all we need to do is win 10 games attitude. It's like, all right, this is gonna keep happening to you at some point. Like, can't we just relax at the end of the year? Do we always have to make it tough on ourselves? Do we always have to make it harder than it needs to be? It's like, this is the NFL. You're gonna have injuries, and you need to make up time early on before those injuries occur.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, whether it's Zach Taylor losing his job, I know they got rid of Lou Anarumo. Changes need to be made. You guys need to start playing in September so that we can see you playing in January and February because your team is good enough to get there and compete. And you've proven to be the team that can go toe to toe with the Chiefs and all these other teams, the Bills, the Ravens. So let's see it. So stop playing like shit in September so we can actually see this in formalities here. You're ruining Joe Burrow's career at this point.
Yeah, no, another year of this, and then huge changes have to be made.
Absolutely. Well, we covered week 18. We talked about the worst top fives. We talked about Joy Taylor's fun ride at FS1. You're not going to want to miss it in 2 days from now when we preview all the games in Super Wildcard Weekend. We're going to bring the boom. We're going to bring the Super. We're going to bring the Wilds, and we're certainly going to bring the card weekends as well. So you're not going to want to miss it.
Yeah, and then most importantly, while you're waiting to watch those games on the weekend, while you're waiting for the next episode of the Brickyard podcast, most importantly, stay brick.
Stay break. I like how we talked about Joy Taylor. Very
Yeah.
wasn't a segment, but we talked about it. We mentioned it.